All right, I'm here with Lee Henson, the CEO of AgileDad, and he's here to answer some questions we had from our viewers. The first question is, what is the best tip for people wanting to do Agile?
I think the best tip for people who want to do Agile is to realize that it's not all or nothing, that there are steps that you can take in order to enhance your Agile process, and that it's more about how we treat the people with dignity and respect, and how we give them a good work-life balance, and how we focus on what we're trying to do from an outcome perspective, and really understand our target audience so that we can have a good, solid implementation. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. There's no silver bullet. It's just a matter of trying to combine the best practices with regard to an implementation, keeping it simple, deciding what not to do, with the humanizing effect that makes the Agile implementation the best it can be.
All right, thank you very much. Then we go on to our second question. What is the biggest challenge you see now in Agile DevOps?
So the biggest challenge, this is one that is near and dear to my heart. There's actually three main issues that I see. So at our company, we have an opportunity to service 43 of the Fortune 100 companies here in the United States. And what we've found is the three big problems. Number one is a clear definition of roles and responsibilities. Oftentimes organizations create additional roles, or they're calling people by title only or by name only, and they're not really practicing the role that they have. So sometimes, whether I call it a business analyst or a functional analyst, the title doesn't necessarily, the name, what you call it doesn't make any difference. You could call it Gummy Bear number 74. As long as you understand what these people are responsible for and make sure you have good coverage. The second challenge is definition of done. I think that a lot of people don't focus on the end game. They don't focus on what they want in the end. So instead, they wind up focusing on, the smaller picture. And while Agile is about doing things iteratively and just in time, sometimes you do need to have that end goal in mind in order for you to understand what constitutes not just done for a backlog item, but what constitutes done for a release or done for a project? Are we trying to do things time-driven or feature-driven? Or are we really focused on the consumer needs? Where are we and what can we do better? And then I think the third thing, probably the biggest one, is the inability of the product owner to clearly translate backlog items in such a way that it's easily consumable by teams, including DevOps, and in such a way that it maintains the context. I think that we do a good job in many cases of breaking things down, but then when we receive a backlog item that says build the widget, without the context of why, where did this widget come from, what is it? We could have crystal clear acceptance criteria, but still build the wrong thing. So I think that it's a matter of getting that balance between building the right thing, making sure that we're building the right product or service for our consumer and focusing on outcome, building the thing right, making sure we focus on quality and creating something that's worthwhile, and building it fast so that we have some emphasis on speed, because speed's important. That way you can have that constant feedback loop and you can get early feedback so that you can make sure you're doing the right thing.
All right, thank you very much. The third question from Sarah is, where do you see Agile in 2 years?
Wow, in 2 years.
That's short.
Yeah, I was about to say that in Agile terms, that's like right around the corner.
Yeah.
No, in 2 years from now, I think that we're going to have another revolution within Agile. And I know that sounds interesting, but in the early days of Agile, we had people who were trying to decide whether it should be Scrum or Extreme Programming or Dynamic Systems Development Method or Agile Unified Process. There was this excitement around the Agile process. And I think that we're going to see the same thing again, but this time with scaling. There's SAFe, there's LESS, there's Scrum at Scale, there's hundreds of these things that are just popping up out of nowhere. And I also see the same thing being true with organizations who are providing certifications and different things along those lines. I think that we're going to have that revolution, and we're going to come to the conclusion that the hybrid approach is actually what works best, but that foundationally we need some kind of hub. So for example, after the Agile Manifesto, when things started to come together, we discovered that Scrum was that hub. So 89%, according to the State of Agile survey from 2017, 89% of organizations use Scrum as their foundation, and they build around it. I think the same thing is going to happen with regard to scaling. We're going to have to pick away, and we're going to have to build around it. And I see that there's going to be opportunities for organizational growth, but my hope is that the focus will be more on the people. and that we're not just focused on the consumers, but we're focused on the people who work for us. And we try to get that work-life balance back and try to get integrity back into humanizing the work that we do. And that's what I'd really like to see in 2 years.
Do you think it's going to be a combination of the like less and scale that we see now, or do you think it's going to be like a total new one? Because they take the best of everything and
right, and that's hard to say, because I think that people who own those, unfortunately, people who own those current methods or those current ideas, they're holding them a little too tightly, and what's happening is they're not freely giving the pieces that work, so that you can come up with a more holistic approach. While I'd love to see a new holistic approach, because I think that I often call it the common sense approach, right? I want to see something that just makes sense. But what we're finding is that if I had to guess, it would probably be pulling bits and pieces from less, from Scrum at scale, emphasis on less, because I think less is probably the strongest one out there now. But I think that when you pull all these together, that if you really do thoughtfully go in and not try to make it a one-size-fits-all solution, that you'll end up with a good hybrid approach. And whether that's a new solution or whether it's just pulling the bits and pieces, that's yet to be seen.
Yeah. All right. Our final question is, what are the good companies doing that the bad are not?
That's a good question. I could say there's lots of things, but if I had to zoom in on one or two things, I think that the good companies are starting to really invest in how they go about choosing what products or projects they want to work on. So what I mean by that is, even when it comes to funding a project, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll break it down into 3 rounds of funding. They'll do an initial round of funding for ideation, meaning if you've got a good idea, Luke, that you want to become part of a product or service, you would receive a small amount of funding to vet out that idea to see if it was a good idea. Once we got to that, then you would receive the second round of funding, which would be MVP, which would give you an opportunity to get that proof of concept, to do minimal viable product, to see if it's something that makes sense. And then the final round of funding would be build out. And that's something that I'm seeing more and more often, that companies, instead of just saying we do 1 round of funding, we approve you for $1.8 million or $1 billion, whatever it might be, they're breaking it out so that they can vet out what not to do. And that kind of leads me to number 2. So another thing that I see that good companies are doing is they're deciding early what not to do. So if they know that something's not going to be a winner, if they know that something is going to be, potentially difficult, they're weighing out high risk items, and they're trying to really dig deep into the things that they know have a great chance for potential success, but they're not afraid to say no. They're not afraid of failure. And the last one is one that we were talking about on break previously, and that would be failure breeds innovation, right? You can't be afraid to take a risk. You can't be afraid to take a chance. And I think that startup mentality started to go away as people started focusing more and more on the process. But now, with the reintroduction of good, powerful, large companies like Apple, AT&T, Citigroup, whoever, implementing policies to where failure is okay as long as there's some learning experience that comes from that failure, you're starting to see this humanized approach. You're starting to see people treating their associates with dignity and respect. You're starting to see failure as an option. You're starting to see this transition around building teams and team health and helping people really have good understanding of why we're doing what we're doing. And I think the big thing, the big takeaway, is having a powerful vision statement. Having someone, if I walked up to someone in the workplace and I said, so what is your name? What do you do? What company are you with? And then I said, what product do you work on? Or what's your main product or service? And I asked why. I would want someone, I'm tired of hearing people say, because that's what I get paid to do, right? I want to hear someone say, for our target customer who's suffering from this problem, our product or service is this type of product or service that provides this key benefit or compelling reason to buy it. Unlike our competitors, our product or service does this better. And I think that when we start really focusing on the outcome and identify who our target audience really is, what are we trying to achieve, what problem are we trying to solve, what are we trying to make better, it's just going to give us an opportunity to really build products and services that make the world a better place. And I think that in the spirit of the Agile Manifesto, that Alistair Coburn would say he's very happy with that is exactly why we introduced Agile, so that we didn't get locked into long-winded documentation, so that we can make sure we focused on building the right thing every time. And it's just a great opportunity. I'm excited for the opportunities that are out there. It's just, it's taken a long time to get to where we are, but I still think we have a long way to go.
All right. That was Lee Henson from AgileDad. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to ask you some questions. Thanks to our viewers for sending in the questions. Keep on sending them. We have one more movie coming up, and we hope to see you tomorrow.
Thank you. Take care. Be agile out there.
Bye.